It was for her cousin's wedding. That was the whole reason any of us were even there. Margot had been talking about this wedding for 6 months. Not obsessively, just the way you mention something when it keeps coming up. The venue, the dress code, the fact that the resort was up in the Smoky Mountains, and probably gorgeous in October. I'd heard enough about it that I could have drawn a map of the event timeline from memory. Rehearsal dinner Friday night, ceremony Saturday at 4, brunch send-off Sunday morning. 3 days, 2 nights, I was not supposed to be there. Let me back up. Margot and I had been friends since our junior year of college. The kind of friends where you end up in the same orbit by accident. Same study group for an economics class neither of us wanted to take. And then, somehow you never leave that orbit. We'd graduated, moved to different apartments in the same city, texted each other about nothing and everything, shown up to each other's bad days without being asked. For 4 years, that's what we were. Friends. Solid, uncomplicated friends. Her family had a different interpretation. I didn't know that until about 2 weeks before the wedding, when Margot called me and said, with the particular flatness in her voice she uses when she's about to ask something she already feels guilty about. I need to ask you something weird. She explained it quickly, the way people do when they've rehearsed a thing too many times and just want to get through it. Her cousin Addie's wedding was a family event. Big family. Loud family. The kind of family that operates on a social logic that is completely internal, and if you've been around long enough, you know the rules without being told them. One of those unspoken rules was that Margot, at 28, showing up alone to a family wedding was going to generate a particular kind of attention she did not want to deal with. My aunt is going to ask me about every guy I've ever mentioned to her, she said. And I have mentioned you. Multiple times, apparently, in ways that, okay, I maybe didn't correct her when she assumed something. What did she assume? A pause. That you're my boyfriend. I didn't say anything for a second. It started like 2 years ago, Margot said. She asked who I was spending New Year's with, and I said you, and she went a direction with that. And I was tired and it seemed easier to just let her, and then it kept coming up. And now apparently my whole family thinks we've been together for 2 years, and I am so sorry. I know this is insane. It was a little insane, but it was also Margot. And the thing about Margot is that she never asks for things. Not really. She'd shown up for me more times than I could count over 4 years, and she was sitting there on the other end of the phone, sounding genuinely embarrassed, and I heard myself say, okay, what do I need to know? She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. We prepped. Not intensively, more like a light review. How we'd met, how long we'd been together, whether I'd met her parents. I had actually twice at separate things. She told me her aunt's name was Ruth Ann, and she was the one to watch, because Ruth Ann noticed everything and forgot nothing. She told me her parents were fine. They knew the real situation. They thought it was funny. She told me her cousin Addie didn't care either way. She just wanted everyone to show up and be happy. She told me the resort had booked her a room. Singular. They had a block of rooms, she said. I booked one, and I didn't think about it until last week. But there's a king bed, and the resort is sold out because of the wedding block, and I completely understand if that's a deal breaker. I can look at other. Margot? Yeah. It's fine. She went quiet for a moment. You're sure? It's a big bed. We're adults. It's fine. I was sure. I was also, in a way I didn't examine too closely at the time, a little bit looking forward to it. Not the sharing a bed part specifically. Just the 3 days. Just being there with her somewhere outside of our normal city, normal routine, normal careful orbit. We drove up together on a Friday afternoon. 5 hours, good playlist, the kind of easy conversation that's hard to explain to people who don't have it. Where you can go from something serious to something stupid in 30 seconds without any whiplash. The mountains started coming up around hour 4, the trees hitting their full October color, and Margot had her feet up on the dashboard and was describing in detail why her Aunt Ruth Ann once made an entire extended family sit through a slideshow about her kitchen renovation. 47 slides, she said. 47. There was a slide that was just the cabinet hardware, just the knobs. Yes, full screen. She narrated it. By the time we pulled into the resort, I was already laughing in a way I hadn't in a while. The resort was beautiful. Old stone building, mountain backdrop, That particular smell of pine and wood smoke that hits you the second you open the car door. The lobby had high ceilings and exposed beams and a fireplace that was already going even though it was only late afternoon. Margot checked us in, and I stood behind her with both bags, and the woman at the desk glanced at me and smiled and said, "You two are going to love the room. It has a great view of the ridge." Margot said thank you. She didn't correct anything. The room was on the third floor. The view was exactly what the woman promised. Ridge and trees and sky going orange at the edges. The bed was in the center of the room, large and neatly made, with a bench at the foot of it and 2 nightstands and 4 pillows. We stood just inside the door for a second, both looking at it. "Okay," Margot said. "Okay," I said. "I'll take the left side. I always sleep on the left. I don't have a side." That's a very Zen thing to say. We dropped our bags and went down to the rehearsal dinner. Here is the thing about walking into a room full of someone else's family when you're supposed to be her boyfriend. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're just holding a slightly different frame around who you already are. I already knew Margot. I already knew how she moved through a room, what made her laugh, when she was getting tired of a conversation and needed rescuing. I'd shown up to things with her before. This wasn't different in content. It was only different in label. Ruth Ann found us within 4 minutes of arrival. She was exactly as described. Small woman, sharp eyes, the energy of someone who files information away with the efficiency of a professional archivist. She hugged Margot for a long time, then looked at me, and her face did the thing where delight and assessment happen simultaneously. "So you're the one," she said. "I'm the one," I said. "Margot doesn't say enough about you." She pointed a finger at Margot. "I've had to read between the lines for 2 years. "That's fair," I said. "She's private." Ruth Ann looked at me again. Something in her expression shifted, softened, decided. "I like him," she told Margot, as if I weren't standing right there. Then she disappeared into the crowd with the speed of someone who had 7 more conversations to conduct. Margot looked at me sideways. "You passed," she said quietly. "Was there a test?" With Ruth Ann, there's always a test. The rehearsal dinner was long and warm and louder than I expected. Margot's family occupied a long table near the windows, and there were maybe 30 people, and everyone seemed to genuinely like each other, which is not a given with families. I sat next to Margot for most of it. At some point, her hand found my arm when she was laughing at something, and she left it there for a few seconds, and neither of us mentioned it. Her dad, who knew the actual situation, shook my hand at the end of the night and said, with complete seriousness, "Thank you for coming. She talks about you, you know. Even when she's not trying to." I didn't know what to do with that, so I just nodded. Going up to the room that night felt different than I expected it to. Not awkward exactly, just weighted. Like the air had a different texture than it had that morning. Margot went to the bathroom to change. I changed quickly on my side of the room, brushed my teeth at the small sink by the closet, and was already on my side of the bed, left to her, right to me, by the time she came out. She'd changed into a sleep shirt and shorts, nothing unusual about it, just the practical reality of 2 people sharing a space. She crossed to her side of the bed, got in, pulled the blanket up, and reached over to switch off the lamp. Dark. We were quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet, more like the kind of quiet you fall into when you've been talking all day and your body is ready to stop. "Thank you for today," she said. Not loudly, just at normal volume in the dark. "It was a good day. Ruth Ann loves you." Ruth Ann would love anyone who said the right things. She doesn't, actually. She once told my cousin's husband at their wedding that he seemed like someone who peaked in high school. A beat. At the reception. During dinner. I laughed. She laughed. Then it went quiet again. I was looking at the ceiling. The room wasn't completely dark. Some light coming in around the curtains, the shape of the furniture visible, the ridge faintly outlined through the gap. I could hear her breathing slow down a little, the way it does when someone is getting close to sleep. And then something shifted. I don't know how to explain it exactly. I wasn't asleep, and I don't think she was either. The room had settled into that particular stillness that only happens deep in the mountains, away from city sounds when there's no traffic or sirens or anyone else's life leaking in. Just quiet. Just the 2 of us in it. She moved slightly, small shift under the covers, and then, her hand, at the back of my neck. Barely there, Just her fingertips, light as anything, at the nape of my neck and then moving slowly down along my spine through the fabric of my shirt. One single movement, unhurried, and then still. I did not move. I don't think I breathed. My entire awareness had narrowed to that one thing, the warmth of it, the deliberateness of it, the fact that it had happened at all. The room felt different now, or maybe I did. I lay there in the dark, trying to understand what had just happened. There was a version of me that wanted to file it under half asleep, accidental, meaningless. But it hadn't felt accidental. It had felt, considered, slow and intentional in the way that things are when someone has thought about them. I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. At some point, the ceiling stopped making sense, and I was asleep. Saturday moved differently than Friday. The wedding was at 4, so we had most of the day. There was a casual breakfast in the main lodge, family drifting in and out in various states of being ready. Margot was at the table before me, coffee already in hand, talking to her mom, and when I came in she glanced over and something crossed her face that I couldn't name. Not a smile exactly, just an acknowledgement, like she'd been waiting. I sat next to her. She poured me coffee without asking. We didn't talk about the night before. The day moved through its paces. We walked the grounds with her parents in the morning. We helped her cousin with a minor crisis involving a missing cufflink. We sat on the porch for an hour, and I mostly just listened to the birds and the distant sound of someone doing a sound check in the ceremony garden. Margot sat next to me with her knees pulled up on the chair, and at some point our shoulders were touching, and neither of us moved away. By the drive back to the inn after the ceremony, we'd walked up to a lookout point with a few others, and then taken a shuttle back. I was having a genuinely difficult time remembering what was performance and what had always been there. The wedding itself was beautiful in the specific way that outdoor mountain weddings are. Everyone looked good. The air was cold enough to see your breath, which the photographer clearly loved. Addie cried during the vows in a way that made the whole room go soft. Margot grabbed my hand during one moment. I'm not sure she was aware she did it, and held it for the duration of the vows, and then let go when the applause started. At the reception, we danced. This was not in the plan. There was no plan about dancing. But the band started playing something neither of us could name, but both of us apparently knew, and Margot turned to me and raised one eyebrow, and I stood up, and that was it. She is not a careful dancer. She's not trying to look good, she's just moving, and there's something in that is entirely her. The same energy she brings to everything she does, this refusal to perform for the room. I was more careful than her, at first. By the second song, I wasn't. At some point, Ruth Ann drifted past, caught my eye, and gave me one slow, satisfied nod, like I had confirmed something she'd already decided. We stayed on the dance floor through 4 songs. Then we went back to the table and Margot leaned her head onto my shoulder for a second. Just a second, and said, "I'm tired," in a tone that meant something else. Not a complaint, just honesty. "Me too," I said. We said our goodnights to the people who needed goodnights, hugged Addie, who told Margot she was glowing, and told me it was great to finally meet the guy who had Margot's whole face on it when she talked about him, and then we went upstairs. The room was the same room. Same view, same lamp, same 4 pillows. Margot sat on the edge of the bed and took off her heels, and there was something so ordinary about it. The click of the heels on the floor, the exhale, the reaching up to take out whatever was holding her hair, that I had to look somewhere else for a second. She changed in the bathroom again. I changed quickly again. We were in bed within 10 minutes, lights out. This time the quiet was different, more awake. Like both of us were very specifically not sleeping. "Addie said something to me," Margot said. "What?" "In the bathroom, before the reception," she said. A pause. "She said she was glad I brought someone, and that she'd always hoped for this. For me. And I didn't know what to say to her, so I just said thank you." "That's a reasonable response." She said one other thing. "Yeah, a beat." She said she could tell it was real. The room was quiet. "What did you say to that?" I asked. "I didn't say anything." Another pause. I wasn't sure what was true. I turned my head to look at her. The room wasn't completely dark tonight either. A little more light than last night, the moon had come up, enough to see the outline of her face, the fact that she was already looking at the ceiling. "Margot." "Yeah." I said it as evenly as I could, the thing I'd been turning over since the night before, since her hand on my spine in the dark, since her fingers light as anything, tracing something I wasn't sure I was allowed to name. Do we need to keep pretending? She turned her head, looked at me. I don't know, she said. Do you want to? And here is the thing that I keep thinking about, the thing that still gets to me when I turn it over. She wasn't asking me if I wanted to keep pretending. She was asking if I wanted to stop. No, I said, I don't. She didn't say anything right away. She turned back to the ceiling, and then she said very quietly, I mentioned you to Ruth Ann 2 years ago because I wanted to. Not because it was easy. Because I wanted her to know there was someone. I didn't have a speech ready. I didn't have anything prepared because I had not been expecting this night, this conversation, this version of things. So I just said what was true. I've been in your orbit for 4 years and I have never once wanted to leave it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a lot to say in the dark. You started it, I said. Last night. A pause. Then she laughed. A real one. The quiet kind, the kind she does when something catches her off guard and she's not trying to perform it. She turned on her side to face me, and I turned on my side to face her, and we were just there in the dark, close but not touching, the mountain quiet all around us. I thought you were asleep, she said. I was not asleep. I noticed that you didn't move. I was trying to figure out what it meant. Did you figure it out? Eventually. She looked at me for a second. Then she reached out, the same hand, the same deliberateness, and put her palm flat against my chest, over my heart, without any pressure. Just there. Okay, she said. Okay, I said. We talked for another hour. Not about anything with weight, just the kind of talking that happens when you've crossed something and you're both still catching your breath on the other side. At some point we stopped talking, and I didn't know exactly when she fell asleep, only that at some point her breathing changed, and her hand had moved and she was very still. I lay there for a while in the good quiet. Sunday morning, the brunch send-off. Scrambled eggs, mimosas, Ruth Ann holding court at the end of the long table. When Margot and I came down together, Ruth Ann looked at us and then looked at me with the expression of someone who has been proven right about something they were very confident about and said nothing because she didn't need to. Margot's dad caught me by the coffee station before we left. She doing okay? He asked. She's good, I said. He nodded, poured his coffee, and then, without looking up, said, Don't wait too long, you know. She's patient, but she's been patient for a while. I didn't know quite what to say to that either, so I just nodded. We drove home on Sunday afternoon. Same playlist, same easy conversation, except something had shifted in the room the way the air shifts after a storm. Everything technically the same, but cleaner. Margot had her feet up on the dashboard again. At some point, she turned the music down and said, So what happens now? Not a question, not quite a statement, just the sentence, let out into the air. I think, I said, keeping my eyes on the road, that we stop pretending we haven't been doing this for a long time. She turned and looked at me. I could feel it without looking. Yeah? She said. Yeah. She turned back to the window, put the music back up. About 20 miles later, she reached over and put her hand on mine, where it was resting on the center console. She didn't look at me. She just left it there. I left mine there too. Tell me, if you were in that room with someone you'd been circling for 4 years and they traced a line down your spine in the dark, would you have said something sooner? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone.